Welcome to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are a user-supported website. What does that mean to you? We are not funded by the corporate machine. We will always strive to give you the truth, always give you an opportunity to respond, rebut, contribute. I'd like to ask you all to visit our homepage, see all the things that are there. Your donations not only fund the radio station, but they keep alive the website, which supplies you with archives, a forum, a great library where you can download documents. There's a survival store. You can learn how to build a tribe, learn how to home can, how to build a bug-out bag. There's a survivor blog. There are links to weather, news, space information, government documents, the seismic activity that's going on in the globe, air and water information, news about our Earth in general, whether it be the magnetosphere or the radiation, links all over the place, all over the world, HARP information, T-shirts and stuff. The swag store is a wonderful place just to get a little memento. Make sure that you're with us in the chat rooms as well, and you have your choice of Java or Flash chat. And be sure to check out the Crow's Nest, where our financial advisor, the Crow, keeps you updated on any financial news that may affect your finances today. Thank you, and make sure you're with us for all the live shows. Check the schedule. There is a link for that as well on the left-hand side of the homepage. And we exist today only because you have done one of the following things: donated via the PayPal button, mailed a check directly to the station. Maybe you visited the swag and bought a cup or a keychain. Maybe you've told a friend. Maybe you've shared us on your social network. Maybe you've taken part in our Twitter coaching program. Whatever you've done, we thank you, and we ask you to continue to do it. Whatever you may donate today will help keep your voice alive tomorrow. All right, we are back here live with Skyper McGee.
Hey, how you doing, Kevin?
Good, Tim. Glad to have you. I'm going to go ahead and call your guest in now.
Great. That'd be a good start to the show.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
You got her number? Oh,
yeah. Dialing now, actually.
Super great.
And I will be on mute.
Hello, Barbara.
Okay, great. Hi, Barbara.
Yes.
Hi, this is Tim calling, Revolution Radio.
Tim.
Great. Okay, thanks, Kevin. Kevin is our producer for the show.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for that, Kevin. All right, well, Barbara, I just would like to introduce you. Welcome to another installment of PhenomenalE.T.s on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Tim Dalger, a.k.a. Skyper McGee. This evening, we have a special guest, Barbara Lamb, a certified hypnotherapist, regression therapist, a trainer of regression therapy, psychotherapist, a licensed marriage and family therapist, former executive vice president of the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies. Barbara has been a trainer for the Professional Institute of Regression Therapy for APRT, for the Hypnosis Clearinghouse, and for her independently sponsored course, as well as a board member and presenter for the Center for Crop Circle Studies in Los Angeles, California. Barbara also has written 2 books, Alien Experiences, 25 Cases of Close Encounter Never Before Revealed, Crop Circles Revealed, and Crop Circles Revealed. So it is my pleasure to introduce Barbara Lamb. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, fine. Thanks. Nice to talk with you.
Very good. Very good. Did I do you justice in your intro?
Well, you covered a lot of ground there, and I could also add a couple more things. One is that I have a monthly support group for people who've experienced extraterrestrial encounters, and that group's been existing since 1994. Very interesting thing. People who come to it are people who have had a regression with me, at least one, so that we really feel convinced that they are dealing with this particular phenomenon, rather than just sort of being interested and looky-loos. It's nice for everybody in the group to know that everybody else in the group is really experiencing these things too. And then one other thing is that, and I think this is really pretty exciting, is that I'm on the faculty of an online university called International metaphysical university. And this university is very advanced in the sense that they include a department of ufology. So my particular course that I teach for the university is called Varieties of Extraterrestrial Encounters. So I think it's really nice that people can take courses online and not have to commute to a building or a campus, and they can even take unusual subjects like extraterrestrial experiences and the whole UFO encounter and the whole UFO sighting phenomenon. So it's great. I think the world, or parts of the world, are slowly kind of coming along and including these subjects in various places where they didn't do that before.
Yes, I think we have the internet to help us with that. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yes, definitely so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Very well. I've gotten a whole bunch of questions together to drill you and figure out what you have been doing all this time, and let our listeners know. Let our listeners know about you. I've checked a couple of your videos. I'd like to start off with questions, unless you have any direction that you would like to go with. I know that you were speaking about hybrids, and that is something that we can definitely touch upon. But more so, what got you started on your journey to become a therapist, and how did you become specialized in regression therapy related to extraterrestrial experiences?
Well, it's one of those things that I definitely never had expected to be doing. As I grew up and went through college and graduate school and so forth, and became licensed as a marriage and family therapist way back in 1976, I didn't even know that there was such a thing as UFOs or extraterrestrial beings.
Sorry, Barb, can you maybe speak more into the microphone? I think the studio is just asking just a tad louder.
Okay, I'll try to.
Okay, great.
Hold it
Thanks.
Closer, yeah. I was saying that I did not know anything about UFOs or extraterrestrials as I grew up and went to college and graduate school and became licensed as a therapist back in 1976. But I found myself doing a deeper and deeper level work with some of my clients. And in 1984, I found out about the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies, and they were teaching regression therapy. So I took about 5 years of training with them and was conducting past life regression therapy. So that was a stretch from mainstream therapy, but seemed to be very, very effective, very helpful for people. And in my very last module of advanced training, which was in 1988, my trainer said to us, having this advanced training, that it could be possible that sometime someone would come to us who had been really shaken up or traumatized or at least baffled and confused by being visited by very unusual beings who did not seem to be human beings and seemed to be from somewhere away from the planet. So I was really surprised just to even hear about this and hadn't thought that UFOs were anything more than science fiction at that time. But when the trainer said that to our group, something even more amazing happened, and that was I heard in my own head a very loud voice, very insistent voice, that said, "Pay attention to this, Barbara. You will be doing this work." So that, oh my goodness, that was really shocking. And then I thought, well, I better figure out whether I even think that there's any reality to UFOs and to extraterrestrial beings, because up to that point I didn't think they were real. So I started going to lectures and reading different things about this, and for about 3 years, and eventually by 1991, I decided, I think this is real. I had seen so many films and video tapes of UFOs and people being interviewed who were having these experiences, and I thought, I guess I just have to accept that this is real. And very soon after coming to that conclusion, a woman in the town next to mine asked me if I would work with and regress her 21-year-old daughter, who was very traumatized at the time and having these peculiar little beings come into her room at night and take her away and do all kinds of unusual things. She was really very distressed and frightened. And I thought, well, I think this could be real. So I agreed to work with her. And that was the beginning of this part of my work with extraterrestrial experiencers. And again, I'll just say this was back in 1991. So it was so helpful and so successful working with this young woman that she concluded after only 6 sessions, she concluded that she was very honored and privileged and even happy to be having these experiences with these unusual beings. She felt that it was an honor that she'd been sort of chosen by them, and she'd gotten over her fear and was going to move away from her parents, even move to a little cabin kind of out in the wilderness. So she had really changed from being terrified and wanting to be right with her parents all the time to feeling independent and confident, and that it would be really okay if these beings continued to come to her. So you see, that was a wonderful beginning for me in doing this work. It made me realize that, oh, wow, this kind of counseling and regression work could really help somebody who experiences these unusual things. And then it was, probably about 3 or 4 months after that a second woman came along to work with me and have regressions about extraterrestrial encounters. And we worked together for at least 10 years and did, I'd say 50 or 60 regressions just to her extraterrestrial experiences. And then, just as life had it, more and more people started to come, I guess, from word of mouth. I wasn't advertising it or anything. And by now, there have been more than 800 individuals who've come to me for this kind of work, and they've all done regression work with me. And some people have been able to come many times for regressions. They live within an hour or so of where I am in Southern California. And so some of those people have had 40 regressions. Some have had 50. One woman's had at least 60 regressions. So you see, there's been a tremendous amount that I've learned about this whole phenomenon simply from these people that I've counseled and had done the regression work with. So much material has come out, and it's a really fascinating phenomenon. I think that more people should really know about it. And many people have probably experienced these encounters, and they may not even know it, or they may wonder because they have certain clues that these visits have happened, but they don't really know because most people don't remember very much consciously about these encounters. They usually just remember the first very few moments when they're approached by these beings, and typically they can't move or they can't speak or call out. In other words, they're just sort of paralyzed into having to have the experience. And then they usually don't remember much after that, unless they remember being levitated up out of the bed or removed from the car or from wherever they are when the experience begins. So that's why the hypnotic regression process is so very, very helpful, because the subconscious mind has recorded absolutely everything that any of us have ever experienced in any way, whether we're conscious or not. And the subconscious mind remembers all these details and can yield those details to us when we do a regression and go back to a particular event. So I hope this is kind of a good introduction here
very
about
much
this kind
so.
of work. And people continue to come. And during these years, too, I've been giving more and more lectures at smaller groups and middle-sized groups and very large conferences about the extraterrestrial encounters, which I think is very helpful, because more and more people can hear this material, and many of them, just in hearing what I say, begin to get sort of triggered into their own memories of this type of thing having happened to them. And then they, usually can find me or someone to help them with remembering the details and dealing with them, dealing with the whole thing that they are having these encounters. So this reminds me to say, too, I don't think you said this in your introduction of me, but I'm also the president of a group called ASSET, which stands for the Academy of Clinical Close Encounter Therapists. And we have professional therapists and hypnotherapists in various places all over the United States and even in a few other countries, so that if people want to have someone to help them with their extraterrestrial experiences and they live in a different part of the country, they can get in touch with me, and then I can refer them to somebody in their state at least, maybe even somebody quite close to them. And so this is a very helpful thing for people who want to look into their own experiences.
It's funny you mentioned that, Barbara, because my wife was helping me prepare for the show, and she said, you need to talk about our affiliations. And so I went right in there and I seen ASSET, Academy of Clinical Close Encounter Therapists. And if any of our listeners out there want to join Barbara Lamb at her website, you can visit barbaralambft.com, and there is basically all of her credentials and bio and radio and TV appearances. You can find everything at that website. If you have more questions for that, we will maybe not be able to get to today, but that's exactly it. I was looking into that, and I should have put that in the introduction. My bad.
Okay.
But you had spoke about it being a calling from when you first started, and I think I myself too had that calling to be here, or doing what I'm doing now. And I think every moment of our life is pre-planned almost to what we can handle mentally and our capabilities, and we go through it, and we don't know how we've done it and how we've gotten to this point, but we have, and you just look back and you know what it's all been for, I guess you could say.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that when we start out in life, even starting out in our adult lives, we may think we know the path that we're going to take. For instance, after a while in my adult life, I went back to graduate school because by that time, I was in my mid-30s actually, and I realized by that time that the kind of work I really wanted to do was to be really helpful to individual people or couples or families. And I knew before that I always wanted to find some way to be helpful to people, but I just didn't know how that was going to be. And but when I recognized that therapy really appealed to me, being a therapist. I followed that path, and then as you can see from what I said a little earlier, that path of therapy led me into regression therapy and then into working with extraterrestrial experiencers. But I certainly would not have ever thought of that years before that.
True.
But I'm so glad, really appreciative that I have gotten into this work because not only is it really fascinating for me and anybody else who hears my lectures, I believe, but it's so helpful for the people I work with in this regard.
Yeah. It is a very tricky industry to get involved with extraterrestrials and the conspiracies behind them all. I could definitely have seen some of the maybe obstacles that you may have faced in your research and in your findings. I guess it's a touchy subject when you bring it to light, and it's really going on. It's just not on a mainstream media broad spectrum, you could call it.
Oh, that's really true. And all the people I grew up with and all the people in my family, all the people I went to college with and graduate school, they do not either know about this or pay attention to it, or if they have heard of it, they don't want to hear anything more about it. I think that's fair to say. So I don't push it on them. They know that I do this work, and I just feel, well, if they ever want to ask about it, that's fine. I'm very happy to talk about it. Now, the other subject that I've been really pursuing over these years, 21 years now also, is the crop circle phenomenon. And that is wonderful because it's a way to talk to people about something really mysterious and beautiful and wonderful going on in the earth that is a mystery. And the crop circles, you see, really tend to stimulate people's thinking like, well, they have all these special energies and they can really affect people, and they happen in just a few seconds, usually in the middle of the night, and it's mysterious, and for the most part, people do not seem to be involved in the making of them, with a few exceptions. So it gets people to thinking, well, where could these big, huge, beautiful designs be coming from? It tends to stimulate people to think, well, do you think there could be some intelligence that's coming from somewhere else, not from the Earth, but from somewhere in the universe? And so that's a wonderful opener of this type of subject. And while we're mentioning crop circles too, I'd like to just add that each summer now, for several summers, I have been leading groups of people into crop circles in England. And that's a wonderful adventure. People come over and join me there for a week. And, typically I've taken groups of 8 people. And then this past summer, I took a group of 18 people. And it just worked out so wonderfully well. And it's terrific because people don't have to know how to drive on the left side of the road or how to know where the crop circles are or how to find them or how to negotiate themselves through the fields properly to get to them, how to behave in them. So I just provide all that, and it's just really easy for people and very, very enjoyable.
Well, if you get involved with the crop circles, and which we can get into further, we will, then you definitely heard of, out in 1992, the Doug and Dave story, and how they how they were the ones who were behind it all, and it was not alien technology and the hoax they tried to push off with that one.
I know it. It's funny because they were claiming to have hoaxed everybody and having conned the world. But that whole thing, that they had done that, that was a hoax.
Yeah.
The hoaxers were a hoax. So in other words, they did make a few very simple, messily laid down crop circles, nothing special.
Nothing.
And they claimed to have made some of the really spectacular, beautiful ones in 1991 and even a bit earlier. And then, you know what, I think most people don't realize this, but there were some researchers who really traced where the interviews with Doug and Dave came from. And one researcher in England, particularly a man of a really excellent intellect, he traced back that story about how they had made the crop circles, traced it back to an obscure department in the Ministry of Defense in England. So this small group in the Ministry of Defense thought, let's diffuse interest in crop circles. Let's not have people thinking that maybe extraterrestrials or some kind of other amazing intelligence is coming to the earth and doing these things. So they got Doug and Dave to claim that they had made all the crop circles, they said, up to that time, September 1991. And but that certainly is not true. And even though there are other small groups of young men who sometimes do make a crop circle, so those are man-made, that's very small proportion.
Yeah, well, we
think in relation to what we call the genuine crop circles, which are made by some other force, some other intelligence that we really can't really pin down.
Yeah, I've seen the documentaries and read about them and the energies that people experience and the way gadgets function within these circles, and just the way the weed or whatever, the corn or whatever it be that the field is in, the way it's broken is a different shape, and you can't duplicate that. And of course, they've always tried to cover it up because it is off-world technology, and they don't want us to know that they're visiting us. So in my opinion, it's a matter of time before they come out on a full scale and let everybody know that they're here. But I think they're subtly doing it with groups of people, such as myself and my wife, and they haven't come to her kids or my mother, and they pick and choose who they go to. It almost seems. Are you getting that feeling? They don't just go everywhere, right?
Oh, you mean the extraterrestrials themselves?
Yeah, exactly. They pick and choose who they,
Well, this is a question that probably most people who experience those encounters wonder, and they may wonder it for decades and decades. Basically the question, why me? Why are they taking me, but they're not taking my neighbor? Or they're not taking my brother, And so when people have done regressions on that subject, in other words, why me? Why am I the one having these experiences? There are a couple of things that tend to come up in those regressions. The first one is that in the regression, you see, we can go back to any length of time, depending on what we're looking for. And in these kinds of regressions, the person tends to find himself in what we would call the soul or spirit state of being before coming into this particular lifetime. So this is presupposing that when we die, we go into a spirit realm, and we're very conscious, and we're there for a while, varying lengths of time, it seems, and then we get ready to come back into another lifetime. So many people I've regressed have gone back to that soul state of being when they're planning and deciding important things like where they're going to be born on the earth, what kind of parents are they going to have, which family will they belong to, what kind of race will they be, what kind of culture, what will be some of the major influences in their life, and, very important decisions like that. And into this planning process, we could call it, in come a couple of extraterrestrial beings who must also at that point be in the spirit realm. And they asked this person, would you work with us when you are in that lifetime you're about to go into? Would you let us visit you and do various things with you? And the person finds in this type of regression that he has said, yes, I'll cooperate with you. And so it's been a soul agreement. But just like everything else we decide consciously as a soul before coming into this lifetime, we forget those things that we decided that we were going to experience or work on or take care of. And so we forget this agreement. And then when these experiences start to happen to that person, he's very surprised and shocked and maybe puzzled and baffled about it. But once he realizes, because of this kind of regression, that he himself had agreed to having these contacts, these encounters, and he agreed that in that soul state of being, it seems to make it easier to accept that these encounters are happening. Now, the second thing that some people find when asking the why me question is that in the regression they find themselves back in a previous lifetime in which they themselves were the type of extraterrestrial being. They were one of them, the type of extraterrestrial being that is currently visiting them in this life. And when they learned some of the details about that society of beings, extraterrestrial beings, that they were, then it really helps them to understand why these beings are doing the things that they are doing with them now in this lifetime. So the person realizes, okay, I'm a human being now, and maybe I have been for a few lifetimes. But before that, I was an extraterrestrial living on a different planet. Ooh. And wondering about human beings.
Well, you know what? Maybe hold that thought, if you will, Barbara. We'll just take a station ID because that was something I wanted to get into. But you were you were an ET in your past life, and that's great. So if you can't just sit back there, we'll take a station ID.
Sure.
All right, thanks.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We are awake. We will not be deterred. We shall find the truth. Politics, New World Order, weather control, the systematic destruction of humanity is in progress, and we are preparing to stand tall, and we attempt to awake others. Please note, we are listener supported, so click a banner, make a donation. I do not have sponsors or commercials to support my efforts. Now, stand by. You are being connected.
And we're back, and it's PhenomenalE.T.s with guest Barbara Lamb, and you can visit Barbara at barbaralammft.com. And just before the ID, we were speaking about you being an ET in your past experience, in your past life. Would you like to go into that further?
Well, I don't know that we really have to, except that I certainly have run into some very, very interesting situations with some people when they've gone into a previous lifetime or even a series of lifetimes as an extraterrestrial being. And that's given me a window on the nature and the purposes of some of these extraterrestrial beings. For instance, one woman client of mine a few years ago, we had probably 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 regressions to her previous lifetimes as a particular kind of extraterrestrial being. And they were very, very involved, according to these regressions, very involved in different methods of consciousness. In one lifetime, they were concentrating on being very psychic and very telepathic and doing remote viewing and remote sensing, all good conscious exercises that they were doing. And in another lifetime, they were developing how to have a group consciousness, a group mind. And that was something that she did develop to a certain extent in that lifetime as one of these taller gray beings whom she called the Zetas. That's what they called themselves. And then she went into a lifetime where she was actually part of a healing team as one of those extraterrestrials. And what they were doing was occasionally abducting a human being, putting the human being on a medical type of table on their craft, and standing around this human being and doing healing. So when we were doing the regression, and I always ask questions to help the person bring out more details, I was saying, well, exactly what are you doing with this human being? And she said, we are working with what we call the energy code point of this person. And it was very specific. It was healing done with their hands and energy, especially coming through their fingertips, their alien fingertips, into this person, directed at just the right places in that person's body where the healing would be the most effective. And it turns out that this particular woman who regressed to that experience had already, before she ever came to me, had already left a corporate business job. She had a good job, and she was sort of on that ladder up to higher and higher management. But she'd already left that job to learn as much about healing of human beings, fellow human beings, and was taking advanced healing training. So when we did the regression, she suddenly realized, oh, no wonder I changed my career path in this life. No wonder I left management. No wonder I was drawn to healing. And this was all in the 1990s that I worked with this particular woman. But I talk to her every once in a while still, and she's still completely doing a healing practice in Southern California and using some of the methods that she's learned here from training in healing, but also using some of those methods that she remembers because of the regression that she used as an extraterrestrial being in another lifetime. So, so many amazing things come up in this whole process.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. We are getting some comments in the chat room here that the microphone is too low. We can't hear her. But we've tried to turn it up as much as we can on the studio, and you've tried speaking up in the microphone. That's as good as it gets tonight, so go into your systems. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
yes.
I think that as I'm talking, I get animated, and maybe I move the telephone, a half an inch further away from my mouth. Does it sound any better now?
It sounds great to me. I have you on a headset, and it's just about because I have a certain level that I speak, and we sort of do this before the show starts, but it's okay that we didn't do it, and we just sort of balance out the levels, and then we raise it so that all our listeners can hear. But I think they're hearing you fine and dandy. I just think they need to turn up their system sounds so that they can hear you, but I think that's okay.
Okay,
Right.
Well, I'll try. It's nice to be heard.
Well, no doubt, no doubt. So
nice
we have
for them to hear what they're trying to listen to.
No doubt. I understand that. We haven't had too many issues with the volume, so sometimes it's the connection and Skype, and like we were talking about in the email. So we just roll with the punches here. That's how we do.
Okay.
Excuse me. So
we'll
yes,
roll.
yeah, great. We have more questions here from the chat room, and I myself have gotten a few down. And like you've said, you've dealt with many past cases of past life regressions related to extraterrestrial contact. Has there been a commonality amongst your patients, or are they individually unique in their experience?
Well, there are both, I should say. There are some commonalities. I can mention them. And also there's a tremendous variety of things that people do experience in their extraterrestrial encounters. For instance, there are quite a large number of different types of extraterrestrial beings who seem to come here and interact with people. So I think typically people hear the most about the little gray beings. And yes, indeed, they have done a lot. I don't get reports about that so much now as happening currently, but certainly many people have had experiences with the little gray beings. But there are many other types, too. There are taller gray beings who do not seem to behave the way the little gray beings behave. And there are taller tan beings, taller brownish beings. There are very tall white insectoid beings, sometimes called mantis beings. And there are big, strong, muscular reptilian beings. There are also some aquatic beings, beings that have actually been seen by a couple of my clients swimming in the water. And several people I've regressed have had experiences where they're taken by some aquatic beings who do not look human, but they're upright, and they have two eyes and a nose to some extent, and a mouth, arms, legs, etc. But they have skin that's more like a dolphin skin, and they are taken down into undersea facilities, like a set of buildings that seem to be deep down in one or some of our oceans here on Earth, rather than being taken away from the Earth. So there's a variety of the aquatic types of beings. And there are also beings who are more ethereal-like. They might even be sort of semi-transparent. Some of them seem to be glowing and radiant beings. Some have sort of a very pleasant tinkling sort of sound. There are also huge beings out in space that a few of my people have been taken to by extraterrestrials. And these huge beings out in space look to the person like a very huge amoeba-like being, sort of a cross between an amoeba that sort of undulates at the sides, undulates in and out, and something like a jellyfish that you can kind of look into, and it expands and contracts and moves around in space, but without the tentacles in this case. And the people I've regressed who found themselves having that kind of experience, they're usually quite awestruck at first, and then as they're taken closer and closer to this kind of being, they might feel very frightened, like, oh my gosh, what am I getting into here? But once they're sort of drawn inside this huge amoeba-like being, then they report that they feel ecstatically wonderful, and they have a clairsentience. They know absolutely everything about everything, and more importantly, they feel unconditionally loved by that being, more so than they've ever felt in their life with anybody on Earth. So that when it comes time for the extraterrestrial who took them there to remove them from this big amoeba-like form and take them back to Earth again, they just feel so sad and, oh no, I don't want to go back to Earth and to my regular life now that I've known this glory. So those are really wonderful experiences. And some people are really taken to what they describe as a city of lights way out in space, like a crystal city, sort of shining and all lit up. And it doesn't seem to even necessarily be on a planet. It's like a great floating city. And they're taken into the city by an extraterrestrial, where they meet really very wonderful, spiritual, wonderful beings who can teach them wonderful things, really raise them in consciousness and spirituality. So all of this we consider part of the extraterrestrial phenomenon. So this type we don't tend to hear about in public media, I think, especially. But, boy, they are there, and people do have some experiences with them. There also is the human-looking type, or maybe even several different groups of human-looking beings.
The Nordics.
Nordics, you were saying. And they tend to be very tall and very attractive from a human point of view. And they have full heads of hair. They're usually well-built, whether they're a man or a woman. And they often have very intense blue eyes. And, they speak to the person having the encounter, speak to them in English. In fact, all of these beings seem to communicate with people telepathically, just with their minds, but they do it in English. Now, I've checked with people in various other countries, too, who have these ET encounters, and they are spoken to in their own language, whether it's French or German or Chinese or, Spanish or whatever. So it seems like these beings are able to tune into our languages in order to be able to communicate effectively with us.
Yeah.
So, these human beings are usually very reassuring for the person. Like a person might be taken from their bedroom at night, for instance, by 3 short little gray alien type of beings, or maybe 3 little white beings who seem to be more friendly and nicer to be with, or whomever they're taken by. They're usually taken to what seems to be a craft. And on that craft, there might be a whole variety of beings, all seeming to work there together. So there might be small grays, middle-sized grays. There might be an insectoid or 2. There might be a reptilian. There might be a Nordic or a few Nordics. And it seems like they will have a different kind of experience on even that same craft with each of these different kinds of beings when they're there. And also, they very often will tend to see somebody on the craft who looks human at first, but on closer look, the person realizes, there's something not quite right here. I thought this was a human, but now I'm not so sure. And we are realizing that some of those beings may very well be hybrid beings. In other words, a combination of a certain group of extraterrestrials and a human being. And some of those hybrids, if they're maybe a fourth or fifth generation of hybrids, they can look quite human, but maybe not quite human enough to be here amongst us, really living with us on Earth. But I will move right on to say that as far as I and some other people can tell, that there are people who are hybrids living right with us. And they certainly appear to be humans. And it seems like there's a couple of ways that can happen. And one of them is that eggs seem to be removed from human females in an encounter experience. And then the eggs are mixed with the extraterrestrial genetic material or reproductive material, probably on a craft. And then that mixture which is very small, is placed inside that human female again, and she will gestate that embryo for, maybe a month and a half or 2 months, 2.5 months, and then she is taken again, and that little embryo is removed and then gestated in a tank of fluid on the craft, tended to by adult extraterrestrials. And so the woman, you see, having had this procedure done, while she's gestating this little embryo, she feels pregnant, and this is a period or two, and goes for a doctor checkup, and he confirms that she is pregnant. And it may be really mysterious to her because maybe she hasn't even been with a man for a considerable period of time, or maybe she has. But in any event, she's surprised to be pregnant. And then, maybe 2.5, or possibly 3 months later, she doesn't feel pregnant anymore. And she'll go to the doctor and he'll say, well, you're not pregnant. When did you have a miscarriage? And she'll say, I didn't have a miscarriage, nor did I have an abortion. It's just suddenly gone. So we call this the missing fetus syndrome. Now, in the meantime, that embryo, which develops into a fetus, is raised, gestated for the rest of the normal gestation period, months, up to 9 months, in a tank of fluid, a glass tank, and the adult E.T.s are standing by monitoring that everything's okay. And that usually seems to happen, according to my experience or clients, that seems to happen in a room where there are many other tanks full of fetuses that are partly extraterrestrial and partly human. And then at a certain point in time, that fetus is taken out of the tank. In other words, the adult beings must estimate that, okay, this fetus is ready to be, quote unquote, born. And then so the baby is taken out of the fluid and wrapped in cloth and then raised in the air on the craft. Then the woman whose eggs were used for this in the first place typically is taken again on another experience and taken to the craft and is asked to hold this baby and is told that this baby, actually this newborn infant, is hers. Now, as you can imagine, this could be quite a shock for some women, and some women are very unhappy about this, very confused, and other women are still confused, but they think, oh, if this is my baby, I don't understand how, but if it's my baby, I'll hold this baby, I'll nurture and love this baby. So that woman might be taken a number of times as that newborn baby is developing for a few months and into being a toddler and a child, and the woman might even be taken quite a number of times through the next 2 or 3 decades to visit this hybrid offspring and watch the hybrid offspring develop. But those hybrid offsprings usually are not human-looking or functioning enough to come and live here with us on the earth. Although some of the mothers I've worked with who've had this happen, they claim that they would really like to bring their hybrid child or children back here to raise on Earth. And when they express that to the extraterrestrials, those beings say, well, that's nice that you would want that, but this offspring is just not really suited enough to survive on Earth. We'll have to have this offspring remain here with us, but you will be coming to visit this offspring from time to time. And that really does happen with a lot of people I know whom I've worked with. They've actually seen them over a period of years. In fact, one woman I saw in the regression saw a 4-year-old child who looked like a very sturdy, stocky boy with quite different skin than we have. But she was told that this was her reptilian human combination, her offspring. And she was really shocked that she had one, but this all came out in one regression. But on the other hand, she knelt right down to be at his level and embraced this little boy and was so proud of him and immediately felt so much love for him. Really quite striking. And then the father of that little boy, who was a male reptilian extraterrestrial, he was watching this and he was praising her for hugging and loving the little boy. And he said, many human mothers do not feel that positive about their children who are here on the ship. And he also said, you humans so often feel that these children are a freak of nature, but to us, they are totally beautiful, and we value them highly. So
Yes.
was that an interesting regression. And then another lady, whom I worked with many times, she had a regression in which she was taken back to what seemed to be the same ship that she had been visiting and the same beings she'd been interacting with since she was a young child. And she had a lifelong mentor, extraterrestrial, who was reptilian in form. And he introduced her in this one particular regression to 2 hybrid sons, reptilian human hybrid sons. And he said, these are our 2 children who have survived wonderfully. And they were age 34 and 36 at the time. So fully grown up and big and tall and muscular. It looked like they might have been human football players in terms of size and musculature, but yet they had very different skin and somewhat different eyes, and their hair. They did have hair, but it was growing differently from their head. Didn't start growing till about the middle of the top of the head and then on back. But anyway, this woman, my client, was absolutely thrilled to see these hybrid children of hers having grown up into being such big, attractive men who were this combination of reptilian and her as a human. So wonder happens after wonder. And the program of the hybridization seems to have been going on for several generations. And when a hybrid from, let's say, 5 generations back then combines with the reproductive material of another human, that offspring is a bit more human in proportion. And then when that being combines with another human reproductively during various means for doing that, and then that offspring is more human. And so as it comes down through the line, different generations, eventually some of those hybrids have such a large proportion of human in them that they can live successfully here, live right here on Earth amongst us. So that's one way that can happen. And another way is that a human mother who is an experiencer of extraterrestrial contact might be taken one night or one day, put on a medical table on a craft, and a being, usually a female being, from the regressions I've done, will feel the pregnant abdomen of this human woman and will, with her hands, locate exactly where the fetus is in the womb through the woman's abdomen, and then give a special injection, like we would give a shot, through the mother's abdomen and through the wall of the uterus and into the fetus. The fetus would usually be at least 5 months old in gestation in utero at that point in time, maybe 6 months even. And apparently what's happening, as far as we can tell, is that extraterrestrial being is injecting that kind of extraterrestrial DNA into this human child who has the human mother and probably a human father. But that injection of ET DNA makes that baby then be a hybrid. And those children can certainly live here very successfully on Earth, and do. In fact, I know, several people whom I am convinced are hybrids, and they are accepting that idea. It's not that I'm trying to talk them into it, but just in listening to them, their attitudes, their psychic skills, their talents, their orientation, their feeling that they're not necessarily from here on Earth, that they have family out there somewhere in the universe, and so forth. It all kind of goes together with what happened with the mother and the injection, to leading me to think that, this is most likely really true, that this person is actually a hybrid, an ET human hybrid. So these people live amongst us. And, we have no idea how many people worldwide might be hybrids living with us. And it's notable, I think, that the ones, most of the hybrids whom I've met here on Earth seem to be very, very attractive from the human point of view. Some of the females, for instance, could easily be top models. They're that attractive, and they're usually slim and usually tall and have very nice bone structure in their faces and so forth, that usually have eyes that might be a little bit bigger than ours, but they look beautiful. And one noticeable thing about them, I think, are the ones that I've met, in most cases, they don't have a huge variety of facial expression like the rest of us do. I mean, they can smile and they can laugh and, exhibit different feelings, but it doesn't seem to be quite as pronounced as regular human beings. And the men, I've seen pictures of men who are allegedly hybrids, and they're very attractive too. They could be male models very easily in terms of attractiveness and tallness and slimness. And they too don't seem to have a lot of facial expression or a lot of emotion. And this makes sense to me because so many of my clients report when they have encounters with extraterrestrials that the extraterrestrials don't exhibit emotion, and even these beings claim that they don't have emotion or don't have the strength of emotion that we human beings do. So it makes sense to me that if that type of being is combined with a human and a hybrid is an offspring, that hybrid might not have as much facial expression and strength of emotion as the rest of us humans do. It's worth noting, too, that human men, are very involved in this ET human reproductive program, too. And that seems to happen in two major ways. One is that sperm is removed from them in one of these abductions. And the other way is that they are mated with by the female of the species that they've been abducted by, that species of extraterrestrial. And that mating seems to be for collecting the sperm. So, you see, men are involved in this, those who are experiencers of extraterrestrial encounter. Maybe not all men who experience the E.T.s, but many of them have this happen. And so occasionally they, too, are subsequently taken to see their hybrid baby on the craft or their hybrid children as they continue to grow up through the years.
That's great. We'll take a station ID, and it's good that we've been talking about hybrids because I've got two questions relating to that. And if we can just take a station ID, maybe you can wet your whistle, take a glass of water, as I will myself, and we'll be back here in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you, Barb.
Welcome to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are a user-supported website. What does that mean to you? We are not funded by the corporate machine. We will always strive to give you the truth, always give you an opportunity to respond, rebut, contribute. I'd like to ask you all to visit our homepage, see all the things that are there. Your donations not only fund the radio station, but they keep alive the website, which supplies you with archives, a forum, a great library where you can download documents. There's a survival store. You can learn how to build a tribe, learn how to home camp, how to build a bug-out bag. There's a survivor blog. There are links to weather, news, space information, government documents, the seismic activity that's going on in the globe, air and water information, news about our Earth in general, whether it be the magnetosphere or the radiation, links all over the place, all over the world, HARP information, T-shirts and stuff. The swag store is a wonderful place just to get a little memento. Make sure that you're with us in the chat rooms as well, and you have your choice of Java or Flash chat. And be sure to check out the Crow's Nest, where our financial advisor, the Crow, keeps you updated on any financial news that may affect your finances today. Thank you, and make sure you're with us for all the live shows. Check the schedule. There is a link for that as well on the left-hand side of the homepage. And we exist today only because you have done one of the following things: donated via the PayPal button, mailed a check directly to the station, maybe you visited the swag and bought a cup or a keychain. Maybe you've told a friend. Maybe you've shared us on your social network. Maybe you've taken part in our Twitter coaching program. Whatever you've done, we thank you, and we ask you to continue to do it. Whatever you may donate today will help keep your voice alive tomorrow.
Everyone on Helltalk knows you're scamming them. We are not going to the cave, Carol. You are under arrest. Come out with your hands up now. We have 5 seconds.
What? Are they going to be able to get somebody up here?
Of course, man. We're coming up to you.
Well, there's no one here yet, and the floor is completely engulfed. We're on the floor, and we can't breathe.
Okay.
And it's very, very, very hot.
And you've got to make it stop, and you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers.
Freedoms, access, information, truth, theory, conjecture, debate, discussion. These words that inspire you. Well, then welcome to Revolution Radio, where we search and help you search for the truth. We shall not be deterred. We shall stand tall. We stand together to fight against the attempted destruction of mankind from forces we cannot see. We must prevail. We are commercial free. And we are 100% listener and user supported. We are here for you, so stay tuned and prepare to be awoken.
All right, thank you for that, Kevin. And tonight, the PhenomenalE.T.s show here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And my guest this evening is Barbara Lamb. You can find her at her website, Barbara Lamb, MFT, and I'll post that here in our chat room. Like I said, our chat room here at freedomslips.com. Oops, I just lost my internet. Okay, good. My internet page is great. So, Barbara, are you there?
I am.
Great. Okay, great. If we can go into another question, Mary Rodwell of CERN. Have you heard of her?
Oh, yes, I know her. We're friends.
Okay,
Very
well,
fond
great.
of her.
That's amazing because she was our guest last week. And we,
good.
Yeah, and we had her on, so it's pretty amazing that we got you on as well. And we can thank James Gilliland for that because he had suggested I contact you, and he says hi, by the way.
Oh, wonderful. Well, hi to him. He's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, and if there's any way you could...
Good work.
Yeah, he is, and there's a lot of great things going on at the ranch, and I look forward to going back there myself.
Mm-hmm.
I was there about 3 years ago. But if you could just speak into the microphone a little better, sometimes
sorry.
sometimes you get a little lower, and then our folks can't hear you. But you've been great so far. It's been good. So
I'll keep trying. Yeah.
Great. So yes, Mary Rodwell, of course, you said she was your friend. She's your friend. Has found evidence to suggest this genetic engineering hybrids as maybe upgrade for humans. Have you found this in your research? Is that what they're trying to?
Yes, and I'm very pleased that she is mentioning that as well. Yes, some of the reasons given by extraterrestrials for the hybridization program is to definitely help the human species evolve. And they see us as, being very warlike and very competitive, very petty-minded, very possession-minded, and so forth in so many ways. At least they see enough humans being like that to really concern them. And, of course, they're very concerned about our nuclear capability and even our nuclear use for peaceful purposes. and they would really like to see us develop technology in different directions, really get off the nuclear, because not only could that totally wipe out all life on Earth, but it could really do huge damage to the Earth itself, which would take, eons of time for the Earth to repair itself. So they see all of this that we're involved in. They see people killing each other. They see us going to war. And I think very rightfully they see that we need upgrading in behavior and upgrading in consciousness. So some of them are really trying to help that change to come about by creating these excellent beings whom we would call hybrids to come here and really help us to evolve spiritually as well. And they seem to give a mission to their hybrids who are here living with us on Earth. And these are very positive missions. For instance, they stimulate some of their hybrid beings here to really work for ecological improvements, knowing that we definitely need to take hold of things on Earth and do things in a better way for our ecology and to clean up the toxins and the poisons that we've released into the Earth and into the water and so forth. With others of their hybrid offspring being here living with us, they instill them to work for animal rights and protection of animals. And they will work with one of their people throughout that person's lifetime, it seems, to keep stimulating them with information that they teach them telepathically, pointing them to certain resources that they can use or certain groups they can be involved in or certain people they can collaborate with to work together for a cause like the one I just mentioned, animal rights. They'll also work with some other hybrid beings by giving them technological information, and that would be for clean, free energy technology to hopefully eventually replace the toxic, dirty sources that we use now. And so they give people ideas about how to invent clean, free energy technology and how to develop it, how to produce it. And they do this often telepathically, or maybe in the hybrid person's dream time, or maybe when the person is just sort of thinking or driving or in reverie. And so they keep feeding these ideas, and the hybrid person may not know clearly where the ideas are coming from. I think that some of our best inventions, in fact, the good clean ones like wind power, for instance, and solar power, could possibly have been developed by people who are hybrids and who are getting this information from elsewhere. And with some of these hybrid beings, the extraterrestrials seem to be helping them to prepare fellow human beings for handling big earth changes and disasters, catastrophes that could happen. And I've met a few people whom I've regressed, and I didn't think at the time that they might be hybrids, but now I'm taking another look at it and thinking maybe they are hybrids. They've taught some of these people to heal huge groups of people after major physical catastrophes. Now, these people don't remember consciously how to do that remote healing of large groups of people, but they've been told by the extraterrestrials that they will know when the time comes. If a catastrophe comes, then all of that information will come flooding into their awareness, and they'll be able to use it. And some of these extraterrestrials seem to be preparing their hybrids to help other humans, regular humans, to evolve enough so that we can eventually become a part of the galactic community. There is, allegedly, a huge galactic federation out there in space, and many, many different species of extraterrestrials gather in conventions and talk about problems in the universe, problems with certain societies like ours, for instance, and they get together and work cooperatively to help to improve things. Now, so far, it doesn't seem as if human beings are taking very much a part in that galactic community. Although I've had 5 different clients over the years who've been taken to council meetings out in space. And one person was taken to a huge galactic gathering, like in a tremendous arena full of beings from many, many, many different planets, different species. And one of the things that they were discussing was problems on planet Earth because of what humanity is doing to each other and with the Earth. So some of these extraterrestrial beings are working through the hybrids to help fellow humans to evolve enough and be conscious enough about the other beings in the galactic community that we might be able, hopefully, to participate well in that community eventually. And they also work with some of their hybrids in terms of channeling all kinds of information, not only technological information, but more inspiring the spiritual development material that some of the ETs are channeling to their hybrids, and then hopefully the hybrids are sharing it with other human beings. So these are just some of the examples of the missions. Oh, another woman I know whom I think is a hybrid. I feel really quite convinced of it. And it seems like her mission is to research the UFO phenomenon and the extraterrestrial phenomenon in great detail, to learn as much as she can about it, and then to share that with public groups. And she also leads small groups of people out into remote areas to do sky watches of UFOs. And so many people can go out for a sky watch and not ever see anything unusual. But this woman, whom, as I said, I believe is a hybrid, she has such a finely tuned psychic sense that when she's out in the desert or just a big open field or near the ocean or wherever the group is meeting for a sky watch, she can be looking in one direction and suddenly say, okay, in back of me and up to the left, there's a craft. And then they'll all look around and they will see a craft there. She seems to have an amazing psychic sensitivity about that, and I think a psychic connection with the beings on those crafts. So she's helping to educate people by taking them out to see UFOs. And once they've seen one, they find that their consciousness is really opened a lot more about UFOs and extraterrestrials and the fact that they're coming here. So the missions are different, I think, with each one of the hybrids. One of them who's becoming more and more well-known, a wonderful woman in Arizona named Cynthia Crawford, and she knows that she's a hybrid. Her father verified that an injection was given to her mother when pregnant with Cynthia. She was injected with extraterrestrial DNA, and she is part hybrid. And her mission is to channel inspiration from several different types of extraterrestrials who want to help humans. And they channel inspiration and direct her how to do sculptures of these different species of extraterrestrials who want to help humans. And she feels like it just sort of happens through her. She doesn't plan to do a certain kind of head and neck and shoulders of a type of being, but it just sort of flows through her and she finds herself doing it. And these sculptures seem to bring in some of the energy, some of the consciousness of that type of being who channeled this through her. So people come to where she's displaying these sculptures at certain conferences, or they see them on her website, and they'll buy the one that they feel the most drawn to. Or Cynthia will channel information that this particular person needs this particular sculpture of this particular type of extraterrestrial. And she's been getting fantastic feedback from people all over the U.S. and even other countries who have bought these sculptures, that the sculptures seem to give them messages and give them special energy or help to heal them, help to know a lot more about that species, for instance. So that's a very interesting mission that she has. I could go on and on, actually,
Wow.
with these things. And sometimes these hybrids are just simply downloaded very, very valuable information that they wouldn't know from anywhere else. But it's always information that would be helpful to humanity and helpful to the earth.
Yes. I would like to ask you, because we do have a lot of questions coming in the chat room, do you feel comfortable with going past the 2-hour mark? Or do you have, it is a 2-hour show, but we can go past if you'd like.
I could.
Okay. Well, great, because we do have the questions piling up in the chat room. So what I'll do is I'll leave mine behind and I'll get to our chatters here because they are diligently asking the questions. So we'll start at the top. Can you ask Barbara why so many researchers are keeping it negative or fearful in the past when it is going on now? Do you feel like researchers are keeping it in the negative?
Well, a lot of them are. But I think it's not just the researchers who are putting a whole negative tone on the alien abduction theme, as they would tend to call it, but it's the media. So much of the media is, putting out, I think they're just disastrous films about monster E.T.s and incredibly destructive, hideous, ugly E.T.s that come and grab people and kill them and all of this sort of thing, create disaster scenarios. And I really object to that because through the 2,000 or so at least regressions that I've done with people who've had extraterrestrial encounters, there are so many of them that are really positive and helpful and even inspiring. There are a lot of the beings that are so wonderful. But, human beings seem to really respond to negative drama, as we can see through all of our media. And, I think it's incredible how people can keep watching the blowing up of buildings and the shooting of people and the killing and the wars and the blowing up of cars and car crashes and chases and, and scary extraterrestrials and hauntings, terrible, frightening hauntings of houses. But apparently, I don't relate to this, but apparently a lot of human beings really like that negative drama. It gets a lot of attention. It gets a lot of press. It probably sells a lot of films and books.
It's the brainwashing.
It is a form of brainwashing. I don't know if it's intentional to brainwash people with that but I think it is having.
I believe it is.
Effect. You do?
It keeps us in a box, and it keeps us not questioning everything around us, and it keeps us dumbed down, in my humble opinion. And I believe that it's platforms like this that get the message out about things that are happening around the world that keep us going, keep the questions going, and keep the truth alive, as opposed to just get home and turn on the 6 o'clock news and feed your kids frozen meals and put them to bed early, and they stray away from the family, and they don't do family anymore, and they really have a plan, I believe, with us. But it's definitely not to tell us about extraterrestrial contacts. That's for sure.
Oh, that is for sure. You are
well,
so
the governments have been letting out their UFO documents. Canada being one of them. And that would lead into my next question. But the governments are relating their information, but they're not coming out right and saying so-and-so that we are communicating with ET beings. But anyway, we can go on to the next question, if you will.
Could I just add
go ahead.
to that very good question that we've been making some attempts at about the researchers themselves? There are some very, very well-known, excellent researchers, and some of them I know personally to some extent, and I respect them very, very much. I think what happens, because I've asked them this personally, is that when they're doing regressions, they take the person through sometimes the beginning actions of what happens when the person gets onto the craft. And very often, not always, but very often that involves the person being put on a medical type of table and then examined, or maybe an implant being put in or eggs being removed or something of that sort, or little scars and markings left on the body. And of course, a person experiencing that is not going to like that. And especially when they have no idea who these beings are or why this is being done. But what I find in my work is that it's very, very important in regressing to one of these encounters to continue past that initial set of things that are happening, the medically oriented type of things, to see what else is going on in the encounter. I personally think that some of the researchers might be stopping a bit short of the whole experience, because after the person is on the medical table and various things have happened on a physical level, what I find is that very often they find themselves sitting up again and being ushered into another room on the craft by different beings, and having encounters with different beings who then are teaching them or training them or healing them or teaching them healing techniques that they can use on their fellow humans back on Earth. Or they're teaching them about space, or they're teaching them about physics, teaching them about time and time travel, things that are really worthwhile to know, or giving them highly spiritual experiences. So my thought, and it's conjecture, of course, is that some of the researchers do very good, adequate work to a certain extent, but may not go quite far enough to see the other more favorable things that happen in some of these encounters. So I hope that sort of answers that question a bit.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Barb. Are you aware of the statements of the Canadian Defence Minister, the ex-Minister of Defence for Canada claims there is alien contact in great detail?
Yes, I've heard. I haven't met him in person, but I've seen a couple of videotapes of interviews with him. And I think it's wonderful that he actually comes out publicly
Yes.
and talks about the reality of the extraterrestrial phenomenon and the fact that they really do come here.
Yeah.
That took a lot of courage, I think, on his part.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm so glad that he does this. I respect that highly.
Yeah, well, I do too. Anyone who wants to bring it to light is a friend of mine, and I get called crazy all the time, and that's okay because I know what I see. And a lot of the times there's speculation on it. Could be government, it could be just a whole PSYOP program, it could be a blue beam, it could be this and that, and I mean you can choose to believe what you want to believe at the end of the day, and I think I know what I want to believe, and that's okay with me too, and I don't think anything can change that, and I've seen the evidence to back it up, and the hundreds of ships me and the wife saw. They're not, in my opinion, they don't act like anything we've ever known, and everybody's seen it around the world. It's not just above where I live in Canada, so pretty interesting stuff that we do see in the sky.
Well, that's great. I'm impressed that you've seen a lot of that.
Yeah, well, it was all thanks to looking up one day in the sky and seeing 3 star-like ships moving across the sky in a sort of triangle formation, and that got me questioning because I knew, like you'd said, it was a calling at the beginning of the show. It was something that just it got out to me somehow and started my investigations, and it led me to this point, and I truly believe in it, and it's something that I think we all need to know, and not all of us are interested. I mean, I've come across many of people who will acknowledge that they are there, but they don't care. And
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I find that even some wonderful people in my very own family have said things like, well, I know that you're into that, but, you know, I have a lot on my plate, and my life is really busy, and I'm raising my kids, et cetera, and working, trying to pay my bills. I just sort of don't want to hear much about that. I just, you know, you go ahead, Mom or cousin or whomever, but, you know, I just, I don't have room for that, basically.
Yeah. That's so what I get. My mother says the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is, and I mean, a few years before that, I probably would have been too caught up with myself to care about looking up. But it's something that it's a calling. Yes, exactly.
But once you do see something like that, I have now very few times in the past 21, maybe 22 years. But I don't think ever before that. But, you know, when you do see that, it's kind of awe-inspiring. And I hear this from other people as well, that, wow, and they want to talk about it. But very often they don't have anyone to talk to who really cares. Oh, and this brings me to such an important thing here, that so many people who actually have these encounters with extraterrestrial beings frequently find that they really don't have anyone in the world to really open up to and talk to about these experiences. Because other people, you know, don't want to hear it, or don't believe it, or think they're kind of strange, or it must be their fantasy, it must have been a dream. And even people who do have these experiences often seriously wonder if it was a dream or if it was a real experience. And of course, it's easy to think it's a dream if you're lying in bed at night and you're sleeping, and then you wake up from sleeping, and you've got these very fresh, vivid memories in your mind. And, you know, part of you might think, you know, that really seemed real. But then another part of you might say, well, it must have been a dream because I was in my bed sleeping. So it must have been just a dream. But I know so many people who've wrestled with that for decades in their lives. Was that real? or was it a dream? And you see, to me, it really catches my attention when somebody talks about having had a vivid UFO sighting, or maybe more than one, and vivid dreams, maybe several over time. So the sightings and the vivid dreams of E.T.s or UFOs or being in a craft-like environment, seeing other beings, when you put that together, that's a pretty good indication that there's something to really explore here with the person, that maybe they really have been having these extraterrestrial encounters. And another thing that maybe some of your listeners might sort of relate to is that it's such a typical thing that somebody will wake up from sleeping in the night, maybe not having been aware of anything unusual during the night, but nevertheless they'll wake up and they'll see a scoop-shaped mark on some part of their body, like somebody has just scooped out the flesh. Just a little marking. It might only be 1/4 of an inch long, but it's sort of like gouged down into the skin. Or they may see a straight line cut on their skin. Typically, I've seen those on the inner forearm of several people, and it's already sort of turned white, this little, very, very thin little straight scar that might be 1.5 inches or 2 inches long. Or they might have it pointed out to them that on their back they might have a little ring of what looks like little pink pinprick-looking marks in a perfect ring shape. Or they might have bruises, particularly bruises on their inner thigh, bruises that look like they were made by the tips of fingers. And they usually come in groupings, like maybe 3 or 4. And the person in all of these cases thinks, how could I have done that? There's no way I could have done that in bed. I never even got up during the night. Or they might have a triangular bruise somewhere. For women, sometimes they'll have a triangular bruise right on their abdomen near their navel. Or a woman will wake up and there's a new kind of pus sort of coming out of the navel.
Well, that would have been to my experience, and I usually see pimples forming on my chest, and they form like a triangle, and I get all worried. But then a few weeks later, I got man hair, chest hair coming out, and I'm getting worried. I'm like, oh no, I'm getting hair, and she says, no, you're not. You're going to be all right. But it turns out it's a bunch of chest hair. Yeah, I told her, I believe they've implanted me with chips, but she says I'm crazy, and I don't know if it's true. I couldn't testify to that, but it's quite extraordinary. Sometimes you get triangle-shaped pimple, like they're 1, 2, and 3, and you're, oh my Lord.
Well, the fact that it's a perfect triangle does make you wonder.
Yep.
But see, the thing is that people can put together these different clues, like a person, let's say a middle-aged person, hypothetically, could remember that, gee, as a kid, even as a baby, I can remember sometimes waking up at night and there'd be this strange little being peeping in through the rungs of the crib, or a larger one looking down at me over the top of the crib. Or there might be these little lights that have used to come in and swirl around in my room, or there might be a beam of light that comes into the room, or there might be a being that comes out of a closet, and that seems to be typical. And then that person might think about experiences when a bit older, like, oh, gee, there was a time I was riding my bicycle home from school, and suddenly I was aware it was almost dark and a couple of hours were missing, And I had no idea what happened in the meantime. And my mother was mad that I didn't come home on time and was worried and was calling the police. And, so the missing time experiences at any age are pretty good clue that something like this has probably happened. But when you put these different things together, the missing time, beings approaching you in childhood, markings on the body, clothes, waking up in the morning and finding that your sleeping clothes are now inside out and they weren't when you put them on before going to bed, or you might even have somebody else's clothing on, and yet there you've just been in your bed all night as far as you're concerned. You put together different things, including maybe seeing a UFO or various UFOs over time. It really begins to make you wonder, and it's all suggestive that it's very possible that you have been having these encounters. And I personally think that the best way to find out about that is to have a hypnotic regression, where you can really go back to the moment-by-moment details, like reliving the experience moment by moment in the hypnotic regression. And you can find out an awful lot that way. So,
and that's what you specialize in.
I do specialize in that, and I feel so honored to really. It's a privilege to
help,
be able to work with people, and so many people say, "Oh, thank goodness, I've found somebody who doesn't think I'm crazy and who's willing to talk to me about this and willing to really help me go back and get the details that I don't remember consciously."
Well, I was telling the wife who my guest was last weekend, because we had confirmed this last week, and she said, "Oh, well, I should come on because I'd love to know about my past life regressions." And I think we all would. If you just sat down and began to understand that this wasn't your first time here. It gets pretty interesting, and when you have somebody that's open to that, it becomes very warming that you're not alone, and people can accept you and understand what you're going through.
Oh, yes, I know it. And again, as we were saying before, so many people who had, a very strong sense that they lived in a particular other country before this lifetime, or that they know this new person they're just meeting, they already know him. And they wonder, where does that come from?
Yeah.
See, a lot of people just shake their heads and say, well, I don't know. But
they pass it off.
Yeah, but you see, I actually was attracted to learning regression therapy work because in the early 1980s, I was doing quite a bit of traveling to other countries, notably Egypt on one trip and Peru on another trip. And in both of those places, in certain locations, if I was just walking by myself and not chattering away to somebody else, a big, strong, vivid memory seemed to come up in me of having been there at that place, but a long time ago, and that I didn't look like me, Barbara Lamb, woman now, but I might have been, a dark-skinned young man with thick black hair. Now I have blonde hair. But, in other words, it was me, but it wasn't this form of me. And in some of those instances, these memories seemed so incredibly real that I really began to wonder about this. Because up to that time, just like I didn't pay any attention to UFOs, I hadn't paid any attention to reincarnation. I'd heard of it, of course, but I thought that was kind of a primitive belief that people way over on the other side of the world believed, and how quaint. That's what I thought, until these experiences seemed to be coming up in me. And in one of them, the experience that came up was so emotional, so full of tragedy and grief, that I actually, while in Egypt that day, I had to take a couple hours by myself and just let all the memory come up. I didn't know what this was. And I cried and I sobbed and I grieved, and then eventually after a couple of hours I felt better. And I thought, you know, it just seems like I really must have been that Egyptian man back there, oh gosh, probably 3,000 years ago at least. But I don't know how that could be. And so I began thinking about the possibility of previous lifetimes. And then a couple of years after that, I met the woman who had founded the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies. And she recognized that I was a therapist who was working in some deeper ways with some of my clients. And she suggested that I look into past life regression therapy. Well, at that point, you see, I'd never heard of that, but I was very favorably impressed and interested that some professional people were actually working in terms of previous lifetimes. So I went to their conference and then started their training, and 4 years later I was finishing my training, and have found that to be a wonderful, wonderful modality of working with people when they want to know the source of something that may be bothering them, or want to know why they have a strong aversion to something, or why they might have a persistent pain in a certain part of their body, and the doctors say they have no idea what has caused that. There might be a number of things that people wonder, where did that come from? And then going back to the source of whatever that issue came from, that sometimes takes us into earlier in this lifetime, or sometimes takes us into what certainly seems to be a previous lifetime. So that's fascinating as well.
Yes. Well, thank you. We do have more questions here in the chat room, and this next one, if you can, is a two-part question, and it's relating to crop circles. Have you heard about how many crop circles are being reported in the United States? And have you heard of Eva Marie Brekes? She works out a lot over in Europe with crop circles.
Brekesto, and Eva Marie Brekesto.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I know her. She's a wonderful woman, a wonderful human being. She's from Norway, and she's a very, very good crop circle researcher and crop circle photographer. In fact, she's just come out this year with a really excellent book full of gorgeous crop circle pictures. Yes, so I've forgotten what the rest of the question was, but
about crop circles in the United States. Do you know if there's? Yeah. Do you know if there's reports of?
Yes, definitely. Yes, there are reports of crop circles in the United States. They don't seem to have the frequency of appearance that crop circles in England do. That's why I go every year to England. That seems to be the heart of the crop circle phenomenon. But yes, we have had crop circles in Washington State and Oregon, 3 or maybe 4 that I know of in California, and of course in all the wheat growing states, Montana, Idaho, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio. In fact, not a lot, but several notable crop circles have happened near the Serpent Mound in Ohio. And crop circles have also happened in New Hampshire and New York State, and on down the coast, Virginia, North Carolina, perhaps some of those other I think Kentucky, wherever a really good crop is growing. Now, the thing is with America that so many people who've discovered crop circles, like a farmer out in his field, for instance, he hasn't known necessarily whom to report it to. And so there may have been many, many more crop circles that happened in the U.S. than we know of.
Yes, of course.
Fortunately, though, there's a young man in Ohio. His name is Jeffrey Wilson, and he has formed an organization several years ago to be kind of the center of studies of crop circles that happen in the United States. And he and a small team of people will go to some of these places where crop circles are reported. But of course, our country is so huge that a man in Ohio can't necessarily, just leave his job, which he depends on, to go all the way out to the West Coast or down to Southeast America and investigate every crop circle. But he tries to find people who will do that and who will take photos and check the samples, see if any changes have happened in the plants. There have also been quite a number of crop circles that have happened in Canada, particularly in the provinces that run right along the border with the U.S. So yes, they do happen in this part of the world, and they do happen in many countries in the world. And so many of them we probably never know about because, again, the people who've discovered them just have no idea about whom to report them to.
Yes.
But in England they do, fortunately.
Yeah.
You can find out easily.
MUFON being one of them that you can report to here. They do a great job. We had George Filer here a few weeks back. So, yeah, there are reporting centers, but they're not as, let's say, complex as they're in Europe for sure. In England,
yes,
particularly.
That's right. Another really fascinating thing about this is that it seems to be that there's some kind of interactive effect to some extent going on between human beings and whoever the makers of the crop circles are, the genuine, mysterious crop circle makers, that is. So what I mean by that is that in a location where there might have been one or two crop circles, and then more and more people in that country become interested, and more people from other countries become interested in those crop circles, then it seems like that country receives more and more and more crop circles. And it certainly seems like it happened in England when Colin Andrews and Pat Delgado back in the very early 1980s saw a crop circle and got very interested and got some other people interested, and pilots of small planes flying over were interested in sharing photographs, and they started publishing articles and eventually a book. And the more interest that happened about crop circles in those days, early 80s, quite simple circles, but still beautiful, beautifully made, then more and more crop circles happen. This has also happened in Holland when two wonderful researchers, Janet Osselbard and Bert Jansen, began investigating, and they would do a lot of their investigation in England because that's where most of the crop circles were, but also investigated the few that were happening in Holland. And they got a Holland biophysicist to test the plants too, LCO Hasselhoff. And as interest grew about the crop circles in Holland, more and more and more crop circles have been happening there. This is what happened in Germany. The more interest that's been shown in German crop circles, the more crop circles have been appearing. So this is what I mean by the interactive effect. It seems like whatever this intelligence is that comes here and lays down these beautiful crop circle patterns, they seem somehow, probably remotely, to be tuned in to human interest and human thought and respond to that. In fact, it's happened many a time that somebody, one person or maybe a small group of people, have meditated and asked whoever this intelligence is to lay down a crop circle in a particular pattern. And usually that night that they've done this meditating, or maybe at the most the next night, a crop circle is laid down with that pattern. So it seems like the crop circle makers, the genuine ones, have been able to be aware of our thoughts when we're concentrating on those thoughts, you see. And then they respond to that. That's happened many times.
Yeah,
really
I remember reading up on that a little bit, and it's a very, very quite interesting phenomenon. But we will take another station ID if you'd like to sit back and wet your whistle again. And if you'd like to stay, we've got 3 more questions if you'd like to stay for those. And
I'd be
then
happy to.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for that. And during the break, you can also open up another tab, our listeners out there, and check out Barbara's site at BarbaraLambMFT.com, and you could search her website and what have you. And that's our guest tonight at PhenomenalE.T. So just sit back there and take in the station ID. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Thanks, Barb.
Okay.
Welcome to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are a user-supported website. What does that mean to you? We are not funded by the corporate machine. We will always strive to give you the truth, always give you an opportunity to respond, rebut, contribute. I'd like to ask you all to visit our homepage, see all the things that are there. Your donations not only fund the radio station, but they keep alive the website, which supplies you with archives, a forum, a great library where you can download documents. There's a survival store. You can learn how to build a tribe, learn how to home camp, how to build a bug-out bag. There's a survivor blog. There are links to weather, news, space information, government documents, the seismic activity that's going on in the globe, air and water information, news about our Earth in general, whether it be the magnetosphere or the radiation, links all over the place, all over the world, HARP information, T-shirts and stuff. The swag store is a wonderful place just to get a little memento. Make sure that you're with us in the chat rooms as well, and you have your choice of Java or Flash chat. And be sure to check out the Crow's Nest, where our financial advisor, the Crow, keeps you updated on any financial news that may affect your finances today. Thank you, and make sure you're with us for all the live shows. Check the schedule. There is a link for that as well on the left-hand side of the homepage. And we exist today only because you have done one of the following things: donated via the PayPal button, mailed a check directly to the station. Maybe you visited the swag and bought a cup or a keychain. Maybe you've told a friend. Maybe you've shared us on your social network. Maybe you've taken part in our Twitter coaching program. Whatever you've done, we thank you, and we ask you to continue to do it. Whatever you may donate today will help keep your voice alive tomorrow. All right, we are back here live at freedomslips.com and Revolution Radio. This is the master of many things. Tim's got a great show going on, and we'll get back to him in one moment, but I wanted to interject with a quick shout-out to Rocky Ward. I don't know if Rocky is listening tonight, but I received an email from Rocky today complimenting me on my tweets and my YouTubes. I was humbled and honored, and I won't read the email and bore you with all that, but at the end of it, I wanted all the listeners to know that Rocky thinks Revolution Radio rocks her world. that is the pay we get. I am humbled. I am honored, all of you that contribute, and especially those of you that reach out and show us that our time here is worthwhile. That's just more pay than we could ask for. So, Rocky, if you're out there listening, many thanks to you. And coincidentally, Rocky is a truther, and she was born on 9/11. Other than that, I just wanted to give that shout out, Tim, Barbara, great show. Take as much time as you need. I'll be sitting here with the microphone muted and stay out of your hair.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that, Master of Many Things. If you are in our chat room here, do thank Kevin, Master of Many Things, for producing the show tonight. He's been quite the help there behind the scenes, and you don't get to see him too often, but he's been there pulling the strings. So I greatly appreciate his help. And just like you said, we're 100% listener supported in the ID. So if you can, please come to our chat room at freedomslips.com and join the chat room. We've got a great list of people here, and we're going for a little bit further still. So do join us in that chat room, and if you can, please click that yellow donate button and greatly appreciate whatever you can help with. We don't ask for much. We are listener supported, like you said. You don't hear commercials here, so with whatever you can, it would be greatly appreciated. And my guest this evening, Barbara Lamb, we are going to go for a little bit longer on the PhenomenalE.T.s show here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Barbara, you're there. Great.
Yes.
We've got a few more questions, and one really long one. One I'm really anticipating for. So let's go on with. It's all about being tuned into the frequencies, I believe. They are picking smart target. Are they picking smart targets? I guess you can sort of get what that question is going at. The frequencies between the ETs and us, and are they picking the smart targets?
Well, I'm not quite sure what that question actually means.
Okay, well...
Yeah, can you get a little more definition of that?
Well, I could only gather that the question is basically, if I can undo, it's all about being tuned into the frequencies. I guess what they're meaning is the frequencies between us and them. And are there people that they picking, they say there are picking smart targets with a question mark, so I can only gather that are they picking smart targets, which is us to communicate with.
Yes. And actually that's a very good question, and I'm glad it came up. It seems to me, from having met, a few thousand, I'm sure, a few thousand people who seem to be having these encounters with extraterrestrials, that the people whom the extraterrestrials choose seem to be really good people. They're smart people. They might be talented people. Physically, they tend to be good stock, rather than sickly and pathetic. They seem to be, strong and good stock, very intelligent. Some of them are quite psychic, and I think they also learned psychic skills from the extraterrestrials. So, in other words, in a way, it seems like maybe the extraterrestrials are picking, quote unquote, the cream of the crop, of human
Why wouldn't
beings.
they?
Now, the difficulty is, however, that some of these cream of the crop people have been distressed and traumatized by these encounters, not understanding what they are and not having anyone to talk to about it, or being told that they're crazy if they do talk about it. So they may have anxieties, they may have confusions, but they may have even trauma over this sort of thing. So you might not think of them as being really the cream of the crop, but I think basically they tend to be really excellent people. And also, I think we need to keep in mind that the extraterrestrials seem to like to follow a generational pattern. In other words, they probably worked with a great-grandparent of somebody right now, and then the grandparent and the parent, and then this person, and then this person's children, and this person's grandchildren, if this person, this experiencer person we're talking about, is old enough to have grandchildren. In other words, they seem to follow certain genetic lines. And I think in following the genetic lines, they, like in one generation, maybe they choose, if let's say there are 4 siblings in one generation, and they might choose one of those siblings to continually have their encounters with. It's possible that they choose the one who is, the smartest, the strongest, etc., has the qualities that they really admire. So they want to work with that person, and in some cases they want to have hybrid children with that person. Does this make any sense?
Yep.
What I'm saying? So I think that the frequency part of the question could be there too, that an experiencer of extraterrestrial contact can be vibrating at a certain frequency that may be similar enough or liked enough by a certain group of extraterrestrials that this person is the one they're going to continue to have contact with. There may be a likeness there in certain ways, whether or not the person is actually a hybrid with some of that frequency in him or her.
Okay. Thank you. A few more here. Ask her if we can understand their technology.
Oh, boy. Their technology seems to be such a mystery to most of us. At least so many of us are not particularly technologically inclined or educated, and so it seems like a lot of the things that they can do is absolute magic, like they're being able to just come through the walls and take us through the walls, or without touching us, levitating us up from a bed or out from a car or up through the ceiling or through the wall. We actually can go through walls and ceilings without being harmed whatsoever. I think that probably most of us do not understand how they can do this. And I think that the crafts that they fly in are so different from our technology. But we definitely do have engineers and physicists amongst us here, us humans, that are really trying to figure that out. And maybe some of them have gotten somewhere on that. But whether we could duplicate that ourselves, I don't know, because some of the crafts, as the research has shown, seem to be almost living beings, living in some way and yet mechanical in some way, and that they are steered and flown by the beings who put their hands in certain indentations in the craft, and the thoughts of those extraterrestrial pilots are getting conveyed through the hands into their instrumentation and affecting the flying of the craft. So I do think that certain people are trying to understand that and maybe gaining on that, but then whether we could actually reproduce that or not, I really don't know.
Okay. Well, it's your honest opinion. Then a few more, just to ask Barb if she thinks the hybrids will be planted here after the Earth changes. I believe they're already here, but if you could talk about that.
Oh, I definitely think that, yes, if it's true, and I don't know if this is true, but if it's true that we're going to have massive Earth changes, yes, some of the extraterrestrials have actually said to my clients that they will put quite a number of hybrids who can live here who are constituted enough like us humans, have enough human component in them that they can live here, they can survive here, that they will populate various areas of the earth to help rebuild things and rebuild them in a different way. In other words, develop technology that's not toxic and polluting and poisonous like a lot of our technology is. And some of these extraterrestrials have told my clients, too, that they do already have hybrids here who will be able to remain here and to rebuild things if there are large catastrophes.
Okay. Thank you. And this final one here, it's pretty long, so bear with me here. I'm going to try to get it out right. And this comes from Alicia, Arkansas, in our chat room here at freedomslips.com. Okay, so bear with me.
Okay.
If aliens are on Earth, then they obviously have interstellar travel. If they got to the point of interstellar travel, then they are probably enlightened because they would have destroyed themselves before they got to that point. If this enlightenment has compelled them to help us and prevent us from destroying ourselves because of our aggression and controlling behavior, as you explained, then how do we explain them mingling their DNA with humans to make hybrids for the sake of our evolution? What is their right to do this? Seems pretty unethical, aggressive, and controlling to me, not enlightened. If the shoe was placed on the other foot, there would be an outcry of ethical questions from humans, even as aggressive and controlling as we are.
Oh, what a great question. And you're right, it was a long one. The ethics of all of this, we certainly as humans can readily question. I think, however, that when we look at some of the things that we humans do with other life forms, even right here on Earth, all of the animal experimentation, all of the genetic things that we tend to do with animals, with caging, capturing, caging, injecting, studying, etc., animals. And these are beings who are right here on the earth with us. I think that we do so much of this type of thing and ruining communities where, like with the mountaintop coal digging and so forth, and polluting of rivers and companies polluting of rivers and killing off a lot of life forms and species becoming extinct. I mean, that's all what we're contributing to right here on Earth. So I think that when we look at these other beings coming and doing what they're doing with us, we have to kind of look at ourselves as well. It's very easy to think of some of the things that the extraterrestrials do as unethical, and it's extremely easy to recognize that some of the things that we do are unethical. Another point of view is that if we would land on other planets and be able to stay there for a while, and if there were very different life forms there, probably, with our history the way it's been, we would want to eventually be in charge, and we would want to subjugate whatever those life forms would be, just like we have subjugated animal forms here so much. And we might test them and experiment with them and capture them and imprison them. And, who's to say that we wouldn't? So I think all of this, all of the above, is very important to ethically consider. So I'm not absolving us, humans, in the things that we do with other life forms or what we might do on another planet, and I'm not absolving the extraterrestrials from what they do, but I'm just, I think, calling for some consideration on our part to look at ourselves and what we do, as well as look at these other species of beings from space who do what they do. I hope that addresses that question to some extent.
Well, it does. And you know what? I overlooked one last question and a link here. Do you mind staying just a little bit longer?
That's okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, Barbara. This link here came from us from our Crow here. He does the Crow report, the market report daily here. And this was of his friend. And this is about the 1973 Pascagoula, Mississippi abduction with the Hickson and Parker issue. Have you ever heard of it? I can go into it.
I've heard of it, yes. I don't know that case in detail, but I am aware of it.
Just for our listeners, the strange case of 19-year-old Calvin Parker and 42-year-old Charles Hickson actually began a day before their famous encounter on October 10th, 1973. 15 different people, including 2 policemen, reported seeing a large silver UFO slowly fly over a housing project in St. Tammany Parish, New Orleans, Louisiana. Only a scant 24 hours later, Hickson and Parker would have the scare of their lives, a frightening encounter with a near UFO. The 2 men were both from the town of Gautier, Mississippi, and were doing some fishing in the Pascagoula River on a dark night about 9 p.m. They suddenly heard a type of buzzing behind them. Both men turned around to see the source of the sound and were amazed to see a glowing egg-shaped object with bluish lights on the front side. The unusual craft was hovering just a few feet above the ground and about 30 feet from the shore of the river. To their unbelief, a door opened in the object, and 3 strange beings began to float just above the water straight toward them. Though the beings had legs, they did not use them. They simply floated across the water. And it goes on to proceed that they were abducted for about 20 minutes, and then they came back to tell their story. Have you heard about the case? You said yes, you did.
Oh, yes, I have. Yes, I don't know those people, but I have heard of it. Is there more to the question?
Well, it wasn't a question. It was more so if you heard about it. The Crow here had known Mr. Hickson and the late Mr. Hickson, and he had just said, ask your guest, Barbara, if she knows about it, because it is an alien abduction. And if you like, what I can do is I'll put it's in my favorites, and I can email it to you, and you can maybe observe it a little bit more, and you can see what that it was all about. But yes,
that would be good. And there's another thing I'd like to mention, which is that I do know 2 of the people who were involved in a well-known case, the Allagash River abductions, and this was written up, I think, as a book, The Allagash Abductions, I think is the name of it, by Raymond Fowler. And I know 2 of the young men who were on a canoe camping trip up the Allagash River in Maine. And it sounds very much like this abduction description. They saw that they were out on the lake at night and in the canoe, and they left a small campfire on the shore. And while they were out on the lake, they saw, but at first they thought it was the full moon. And then they realized that the actual moon was in a different direction in the sky, and that this quote-unquote moon was getting brighter and brighter and coming closer and closer and closer, and came across the lake. And then they didn't know anything until, it must have been an hour or 2 hours or more later, they found themselves back in the canoe, having had a sense that they had been away from it for a while, and they were paddling back toward the shore and had a hard time finding their camping place because the campfire had gone out. And they were all very disoriented and very, very confused. And it was sometime later after that they were regressed and got the details of what had actually happened to them. And I know 2 of those men, as I said, they're wonderful men, just terrific. And they've continued to be extremely interested, as you can imagine, in the whole UFO phenomenon. And at least one of those has continued to have bizarre experiences, which we would attribute to extraterrestrials.
Okay. All right. And finally, the last question here. Do you know if there is a Planet X out there?
Oh, gosh.
What are your opinions on it?
Well, I'm laughing because all I can do is just guess. I'm certainly aware of lots and lots of talks about Planet X and also about Zecharia Sitchin's work and about the Anunnaki coming on the planet Nibiru way back a few thousand years ago to what we now call, what was ancient Sumeria, now the area of Iraq. And that whole story, and then how they may have left at some period of time long ago, and they might be on their way back because they have a 3,600-year orbit of coming into or very close to our solar system and could more easily get here again. So I am very aware of all that information and find it very interesting. And I'm aware that there are certain astronomers who have actually said there is what looks like a new planet out there. And then other people say, oh, no, that's really not a planet. That's a comet Elenin. And there's just a lot of controversy about this. I think it's possible that it could be a planet coming close enough that if there are intelligent beings on it, it might come to us here on Earth. What they would do here, I have no idea. I also think it's possible that there is no Planet X, as some of the astronomers say. So it's a very interesting subject, something for us to keep our eye on. And beyond that, I just really don't know.
That's very, very well, very well.
Make a long story short.
Very
but
well.
It's interesting, and there are possibilities about that, I think.
No doubt there has been many speculation here as well. But we're never sure, and only the pictures can tell, and sometimes the pictures can't reveal what people are claiming, and it makes it harder to believe, and it makes it more interesting to get up the next day and see what kind of new conspiracies have they come up with. Very well.
Yes.
Very well. So I do want to end with this, Barbara Lamb. You do have two books, Alien Experiences, 25 Cases of Close Encounters Never Before Revealed, and Crop Circles Revealed. We can find those at your website, correct?
You absolutely can. And you just, there's 2 or 3 different places where you can click on the book or the title under the book or in the left-hand column, and it will take you to an order form. So the way that, because I'm so non-technological, I am doing it kind of a low-tech way. People can print the form and send it with me. The address is there on the website and on the form, and they can send it to me, the check. And then as soon as I get it, I will send the book to them, and I will sign it with their name, if they'd like that, and a little message. And I'm really very happy to do that.
Well, very well. I've checked out your website, and I think I'm going to do the same. And I think you're out in California, so I don't know what kind of taxes have to be added because I'm in Ontario, but not Ontario, California. Ontario,
no.
Canada.
Canada. Yeah, yes. Well, I'm not collecting tax.
Oh, no, not for you, but there is tax that you have to add on for certain states and what have you to be.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, for a while, just in the last couple of months or so, there was a notice that came to me by email that that books could not or nothing could be sent to Canada for a while.